I keep working as an artist. It's a different discussion. But I mainly work in collectives. So my work over the years has taken place under a lot of different names on a lot of different topics. And some people, it's almost unrecognizable as a practice. Like, so parts of the practice are recognizable, like my villages or company drinks or public works, but as a whole, it's very dispersed. So this good colleague of mine, Mick Wilson, he was the head of research at Varland Academy in Gothenburg. He's commissioning or publishing books of practices he thinks are undervalued and underrepresented. So he invited me to do a book about my work, which was a bit of a challenge because I normally don't publish in my name. I publish under collectives or with co-authors. But his rationale was a bit, he knows a lot of the different things I'm doing, and he said it's important to understand that span of practice as one person's practice. And it's also important to identify that this is a female artist, the name of women not appearing because either they're not appearing or they're within collectives. So there was a double rationale to this. His proposition that the wider practice over 25 years is important to understand as one practice, but also to have my name out once. So that, books take forever. Don't have to say that here. But I think that was like 4 years ago. And it was at a time when I already was thinking about what do I do with all the work to date? I had a personal desire to reflect rather than just produce more, and to move more towards reproduction and leaving production behind me. So then came this invitation from Mick to do this book. And I was looking for a method that would allow me to produce the book with the methods of my practice. So not to have two separate methods, not have a practice that's all about being collaborative and in public and using art. So we kind of was thinking about a bigger editorial process and how this could look like, so that the method of the work is matched with the editorial process. And I jumped to one page, this one. So that poster on the left, those two posters, I don't want to do another project. I want to make a pile. That was a kind of initial desire to stop doing another project and reflect, and to look at the pile and to take it into the future. And the way I work and the sector I work within is very much kind of, within socially engaged practice. There's quite a project risen to how people in my sector work. You get commissioned for a year, sometimes for 2 years, sometimes just for 6 weeks. But it's the finance and the public moments are very much organized around project after project. So I said, okay, I don't want to do this, don't want to do another project. I want to make a pile. And then, where's the copy? Then I was wondering how to call this pile, because pile is not such a good word. And then I often use terms in my work that give you quite a clear sense of what it is as a physical thing. So I called this pile compost. And the pile, I wanted it in public, in use, and used in collaboration. So I was looking for a gallery as the first step towards editing the book that would actually allow me to bring all the material into one space. So to keep the materiality, to keep the physicality of the work, and to compost it, which means like sieving through, pulling things out, seeing what has landed on the pile, throughout the public process. And it was an independent gallery in London called the Showroom, who then gave me the gallery to do this pile, to do the compost, both to allow me to edit and sift through on the terms of my practice. But for them, it was also a question around their own methodologies. What are exhibitions being used for? How are exhibitions, the kind of nature of exhibitions. So then the term compost was born, and everyone like got a bit overexcited of like, oh, compost is really nice. But you know, compost is a pile. It's not random. What's on the pile maybe looks messy, but it comes with a purpose. It comes with a purpose of making fertilizer. So in 2021, I'm just trying to find an image. Sorry for making you dizzy by scrolling through. I literally, wait, let's go back to this image. I maybe do 5 more minutes. So I literally brought all the material I had in my studio to the showroom. And that's not all the work, that's just what was still within my studio, like posters, furniture pieces, drawings, books, merchandise, like all the things that kind of stayed with me, even though some projects had finished 10 years ago or were still going on elsewhere. So this pile was then the exhibition. And the exhibition itself was to offer that pile, or to offer that material towards different interest that comes into the gallery, and to slowly dissolve it. And then, of course, because it's a contemporary art gallery, the main audience is an art audience. They would come with a specific interest, maybe in the books or in artifacts. But the gallery also has a big shutter, so that shutter was open and we had a shop-like element. So then there was a completely different interaction that was based on people liking the look of something or wanting a vase or something. So there was 3 different kind of publics that came in and really went through that material. And the material dissolved by going into different use. So people would literally take things to take them out of my usership and bring them into their usership. And the usership could be art. So like a screen print could go somewhere else as a screen print on the wall, but it could also go somewhere as wrapping paper for birthday presents. So there was this playfulness around it dissolves through other userships, and those userships could be art or non-art related. It didn't matter. Okay, so there was Compost with a big public program, a lot of discussion around archiving, what's being kept, who decides what to keep, like all those kind of like critical, difficult questions around what to take forward into an archive or into the future. Oh, there's Christina. Hi, Christina. And then the book itself, of course, because the compost pile, it was an 12-week exhibition. It was very, very joyful. You know, it was great to have all this stuff, and it was really, really great. It was a nice messiness. You know, so it was an exhibition. It wasn't designed. There was no display. It was like piled up in groups, so you could access it, and it had a really great aesthetics and kind of it was quite wild, but ordered, so you could think about things as something you might want to take away with you. And then the book, of course, is more structured. It's published with Sternberg, which is a relatively big art publishing house. So the aim of the book really was to reach audience and to get into libraries and have the practice concluded also in a kind of more accessible way than the compost pile. So there's 5 major chapters. The first one is around exhibiting spaces, which refers to all the work to do with producing non-built public realms, economies, cohabitations, which is more organization building and compositing. So that's the chapters of the book, and maybe I leave it there and you pick one.
What do you mean by pick one? We ask you to talk more about one.
Yeah, but like if anything jumps out and you go like, oh, let's look at this chapter or that chapter, then because to go through the whole book would be too much.
Well, personally, I'd be really interested in the cohabitations, but
Okay.
that's just because it's place. I'm assuming it's got different places then that you're bringing together. Oh, I don't even know what it means, but that would be nice to know.
Yeah, which page is that? 180. So now everyone gets super.
Yeah, I'm interested in that one as well.
And then the book was how the book is organized is mixed between critical reader, documentation of my work, and an artist book. That's here's the exhibition. That's what it looked like. And then the blind is down, the white, normally that was open, the whole shutter was open and had this really incredible public moment, kind of going out into the street, and let some of the sieving through and looking at stuff. So what did I say? Page 180. There must be an easier way to do this, which I don't know. But scroll. So then there was an extended, there was 3 editors who looked after all the content, after all the text, who also decided or co-decided who's going to be commissioned to write text. And that was Mick Wilson, Jerry van der Noord, and Paul O'Neill. And then, of course, I had a... One second, I have to focus. Of course, I had a kind of critical role because I have all the material. I have all the images. Now it's a bit of an experiment, bear with me. Okay, here. So then it was like down to Mick, Jerry, and Paul to think about bigger themes that can frame the work to make it accessible without, you know, forcing it into categories that don't exist. But we felt like we need categories, otherwise the book becomes too much for someone who doesn't know the work. And here, each chapter would have 2 or 3 texts by others, sometimes conversations, sometimes commissioned text or the republishing existing text work. And here, for example, it starts with a conversation between me and Grace DeRito. And we've been colleagues for like a good 15 years. We know the work of each other quite well. And we always have conversations around why do we do what we are doing, which is normally not published. They're kind of intimate discussions. So there was the decision to bring that aspect, you know, this kind of friendship, how you actually work with others all the time, but with this more intimate moment, with this more intimate relationship of just being friends and talking about things. That was kind of an editorial decision to bring this into the book. So the reflection on the work is not always like from a distance and from a critical distance, but also from, let's say, a kind of intimate based on friendship, reciprocal criticality. So that's the a kind of edit of, I don't know, many conversations we had over the years. And the word cohabitations refers, of course, to the kind of organizational aspects of the work. How, if you start with a project, how do you then slowly over time actually institute or create organizational structures that allow for longer cohabitations. I think the title could also have been organizations, but cohabitation sounded nice. No? So that's one text, and the book has the function for someone who doesn't know the work at all to understand the work a bit better, but also put it within a kind of critical context for the discourse around that kind of work, which is often dismissed as kind of just socially engaged. And that's the second conversation with Stephen Wright. I don't know if you know him. He's a French-Canadian philosopher. And he's a person who, and some of his writing is very kind of important for my work. He published this book called Towards a Lexicon of Usership. And his big proposition is that art has been organized around spectatorship for long enough. It has reached a certain level of redundancy by this, by mainly being a thing you look at or you experience. I mean, it's simplifying it. So his proposition is that if we think of the usership of art, it would also allow art to like leave this dead end. It has maneuvered itself in a little bit. So redundancy, not in terms of art is not needed anymore, but art in its current state is a bit dead. So again, that's a conversation with him around methods and tools for how to enact this usership. And then each chapter has 2 texts, and then has about 10 pages showing projects that fit in this category. And that of course was the hardest part, like, oh yeah, let's just choose 1 image per project. And you're like, it's a 10-year-old project. I have like 50,000 photos. There's like the editor, I mean, everybody who's publishing knows that quite cruel process of letting go. But for example, in the cohabitation works part is Company Drinks, which maybe some of you know. It's a drinks company community based on community economy principles. I started it 10 years ago as an art practice. It has become many other things. So here to use an example that as an organizational format, Company Drinks allows many different interests and identities to actually sit together within one organization. They're not in conflict with each other. So the drinks can be drinks, the drinks can be art. Some people use it as a grow club, other people use it as a social enterprise startup, so that many different desires and identities can sit within this umbrella of Company Drinks. That's why it's within cohabitation. And then other projects are listed. Community Haystacks. Econometric School, which has been a very, it's still ongoing, quite like larger European translocal network of local projects cohabiting within this translocal network in terms of shared interest, but also in terms of reciprocal criticality. Digesting Politics was a group which housed political protest in a very loose way for a while, and then other examples. So that's how the book is structured. It goes from, it's trying to organize, I think, 150 different work in 4 chapters with 2 texts each. And I think it was an art book. It could be called a mid-career retrospective, this book that you do after a while. And I actively wanted to avoid the term, but I also actively wanted to use a different methodology. Like how do you establish a hierarchy for selecting things? this composting and this co-editing and was actually quite a useful way of reorganizing the work and letting others decide what should be in the book, what should not be in the book. And maybe, and then I stop, and let's say artists who have a similar practice with me, like me, there's sometimes a tendency to publish manuals, you know, like how do you do things? And I specifically didn't want to have a manual. So I'm really quite happy with this mix of documentation of work, text that kind of critically explores the different aspects of the work. But then if I go to the back, or what you've seen at the beginning, those posters, they are of course quite artist book style, that the design is disrupted by my aesthetics, and pages are designed the same way I would make an installation. So yeah, this idea that it's a critical reader, but also documentation and an artist book, that was the intention. And then maybe to stop with, and then of course in the, it has quite a long bibliography, because we knew that this would be the book in which the work would be assembled for once. You know, if anyone would ever want to study the work, that's the book where you have the references to all the projects, the references to all the publications, where the lists happen as well. Ah, yeah, that was the big, that was on one of the walls in Compost. I want to keep the books and some boxes, and that's what happened. And I have a new book. But maybe I'll stop here. It was quite funny. A lot of people misunderstood Compost as I want to get rid of my work. I'm like, no, you know, like a gardener who does compost doesn't want to get rid of the garden. That's not the point of compost. You know, it's not to get rid of stuff. It's to let things sit for a while. And yeah, this idea of fertilizer, you know, to like, what do you want to take? This moment of reflection, of calmness, of where to take this next. For me, it was a very kind of, it was a reproductive thinking, but it was, a lot of people misunderstood it as like, I finished to work.
Oh, because in the use of compost, like with feminist writings, they use compost in the way that you use it. So it's yeah, the sort of lively compost, which you bring things together and you're growing things. It's a very rich, obviously rich metaphor, but it's also, yeah, as you say, a material one too.
Yeah.
So for me, that worked. I can see, I thought you meant people got excited because it had this sort of sense of flourishing and moving on and life continuing or whatever, but which is how
there was a bit of, because you know, the actual the things in the gallery, they went, you know, disappeared. They get, and within the art world, a lot of people could only read this as a kind of destructive moment of getting rid. I'm completely with you. I'm just saying, in the art world, it was a bit astonishing that it's not associated with pain to
get rid of, let go. Yeah, but you are also creating this whole I mean, it seems to me this book seems a whole project in itself. I mean, obviously, and you said it was individual, but it wasn't. It was collective in so many ways.
Yeah, no, individual, just because it's the only, my name is on this really big.
I know, I understand. No, I get that. But I can see you couldn't, yes, your name was there, but that even becomes almost a kind of umbrella term, not exactly, for all of what was going on, which makes it really interesting. So you kind of course it's your name, but it actually, yeah, brings in so many other things now when you look at what you've just shown now. So that's really fascinating too. Your resistance to using your name, you actually played it out in a different way.
Yeah. No, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I think, but that was for me, because at the end of the day, it's just 300 pages, it can't be complete. It's a bit like that, why the compost metaphor was also helpful. It wasn't about naming every single element on the compost. It was more about, the metaphor, a volume, a feeling, because of course there's so many things that are not in the book and so many names that are not in the book. And that made me really nervous in the editing process. That made me quite anxious of like, when does it become offensive to people I've worked with that maybe the work we did together is not in the book. But that's why the book is relatively loose and feels playful. So it doesn't at any point assume this like complete overview.
What have been the responses to the book from within your world, the art world? Or the particular art that you do well?
I think mainly this recognition of that a quite messy practice, if you want to call it like this, can be one person's practice. That you can actually claim this, that you just say those things don't always sit exactly next to each other, but I've done them with me as the kind of red thread through all of this. And for me, it makes sense that it's all practice, and that, of course, you can single your interest out of it, but also acknowledge that it exists within this quite big, messy family of other projects that have happened.
Interesting. And how, now that you've done this, you say you didn't want to make it a review, but at the same time you have done this. So did it take you into different directions at all, or do you feel that you're still, I don't know, reflecting?
Yeah, I think what I underestimated a bit is, of course, some of those things that are addressed in the book, I want to implement them now. Like what exactly is the fertilizer from this? What exactly? And of course that takes time, and I feel a bit like that this will take longer than I thought, because books are a massive effort. They take so much energy. But to make it explicit practice now, to really think about the reproduction of things rather than. So, for example, there's a really nice short text in the book by Jun Lin, and she talks about what happens when the founder leaves, the founder leaves an organization. So I now made the explicit decision to leave my operational role within Company Drinks.
Okay.
And to do this with the pace and ideas from the book in this kind of more caring manner, rather than just leaving it behind as a project. And so I think that's a lot of organizational, relational work, governance, all those. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think we know this, but I think to proclaim this more as the work that I'm doing now as an artist. Because the response then normally is like, oh, so now you've just become an organizer, or, oh, now you're just running organizations. And to claim this organizational caring work as my main practice, maybe not forever, but for the next coming years, which will be very invisible, that will be super invisible. But I think that's when I talk to colleagues, there's a wider desire to proclaim that work as the main work for a while.
Okay, so as an art practice, how is that? Then you document it. You keep images that somehow related to that work, or how do you make that an art? How are you making it an art practice?
Probably by describing it. I think probably first of all by proclaiming it.
Okay, proclaiming it.
But it's a very good question. I haven't thought about it. But I feel that this is going to be the response, because the art is always like, oh, what's next? You know, you've done compost, what's next? I'm like, I just said what I'm doing. I'm like, using fertilizer, I'm not quite sure how yet.
No, but for ecologists or people concerned about the whole practice of living, which after all is in a way what you're talking about, it would be really interesting. I mean, and organizing and care for organizing and care for earth organizing as well as people organizing, all of that seems to speak to where you're moving from this. So and that would be really fascinating for others to hear how art as practice is that not only proclamation, but also then maybe helps others who are involved in these sorts of things to pause, to reflect with you or engage with you on that. I think that sounds really I mean, in other words, it's not just, it's a collective kind of practice again. Interesting.
No, thanks for this comment. It's I hadn't thought about it. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Like how to articulate it outside of language or away from just language. Yeah. Proclamation. Yeah.
Because that's what as someone who uses language more or less only, when I see images like this, it helps me. Well, it takes me out of my comfort zone, but there's also something that resonates, right? As a practice also. So, and I'm also, when you said about Stephen Wright saying art is moribund or dead or something, because it's only spectators sort of like passively, but actually art's moving us into different ways of engaging, right? So this book also does that, and then your other practices are doing that, no?
Yeah. I think I think that's this idea of like usership that needs more articulation.
Yeah, usership. Okay, that's the term then.
Yeah.
See, all these terms seem familiar, but you've thought them through. I mean, that's also important to help people think through, because it's not about ownership, it's usership, all that sort of
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, you're right. I should keep those terms, because like, for example, now that we are actively discussing how I'm leaving company drinks, that's a lot about usership. Who has the right to use the organization for what interests, and what happens if my interest of art leaves the organization. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for I never thought about documenting it in some way, but it would actually be also for myself, like giving it a materiality as a process.
Yeah, I think so. Because that seems to be what this book has got, no? It shows a very material understanding of all these complex interactions with ideas of compost, but also what you said, 150 different projects. I mean, that's incredible.
But it was, and then I just wanted to show, I'm quite proud of this one thing. We tried to break down, I make it a bit bigger. I used this, what we developed with like Kathrin at this workshop in Barking a while ago, this idea of like a diverse economy breakdown. And it was an attempt to acknowledge the book, but also this kind of invisible mass around it. And yeah, I just wanted to show this because I thought it's also interesting for the context of the CEI or CERN. How do we talk about the economy of of even the book? And of course, this is heavily simplified, but this page a lot of people react to. Always, of course, always.
Partly because it's put into values that people think they understand, which are money, but then also because you're also pointing to the unpaid or the invisible as well, no?
Yeah.
What type of reactions did you have to this page? Like from whom, for example? Can you, I don't know, extract any patterns of reactions from different groups of people or people coming from different sectors? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we on the black and white image, that's the same kind of breakdown for the exhibition itself. That was in the exhibition, it was hanging in the exhibition. So the showroom has now made this way of making the budget visible part of their operation. They do it for every show now to talk about what do things actually not just cost, but also what do they need in order to exist. And within the arts, that's important, because it also talks about barriers. It talks about how expensive things actually are in certain contexts. That really got a lot of reactions. It was seen as like brave to publish the budget, which still has such hesitance around talking what things actually require. And to a lot of colleagues, it was like it was an eye-opener.
Yeah.
Because exhibitions can also be very discreet in what they actually cost. In my work, in this compost just looked like I just brought stuff, it's just like it cost nothing. And to be very, very honest about how much this actually costs when you pay everyone and just the logistical side of things. So I think for me, in terms of someone who's very organized and like self-organizing and self-organized ideas of like economies and business, it is super, super important to talk about what it requires. And to not have it an obscure thing that's easy to achieve. It's if you have access to some of those elements, it's easier to do. But yeah, and with a book, it was, mainly the less easy to quantify part. That was for me the space in the book where I could get rid of a little bit of this anxiety of I can't name everyone. Those are
Did you list that?
The white elephant in the room. In this kind of like quite in this quite generic wording. But those budgets, that's something I get more and more often invited to do, or like to try and do them for exhibitions or for public moments, to become clear about the organizational necessities to make things happen. And books are just really expensive things. Also to be, and I also do fanzine, I also publish things that cost not very much, but also to have this scale of practice in my own work, from the kind of self-published using the university's copying machine to this 50,000 euro production.
But do you sell the book? Is it sold?
Yeah, it's Sternberg. They have a distribution deal with MIT, so it has global distribution. But I'm not a big name. I'm not quite sure who's buying the book. So normally you would produce a book like this when you have a big solo show or an important institutional moment, which I don't have at the moment. So I don't quite know how it's selling yet. But it's it's going into universities, it's going into teaching, and that was the initial intention of the book, to solidify this towards a world where it will become to a degree part of an art history of the time.
I don't know if my question is a bit kind of too basic, or perhaps you have already touched upon this, so I apologize for coming in late.
No.
But how did all of it kind of come about? Was it your own need? Was it your own idea? Was it something that you kind of, there were requests coming from different professionals, audiences, or?
Yeah, no, I mentioned at the beginning, it's Mick Wilson. I don't know if you know him. He was, he once in a while commissions books, and he invited me to do a book that spans the entire practice. Because he was saying most people don't see this or don't know this, and he's thinking in teaching terms. He, for example, wants his students to understand that this quite messy practice can be one person, can be a lifelong practice, you know. That was his reason. And then he also wanted to use the book to locate the practice within certain critical thinking, because it's practice that's quite often sidelined as just social or just, you know. Yeah, but it was his initiative to also, he fundraised most of the money for the product.
Wow. So in terms of just a very practical thing, so you had to deal with or he dealt with the publisher, or you dealt with the publisher, or you did it together?
We did it together, because again, it was like, I mean, Paul O'Neill from Public, I mean, that people with like really significant publishing experience in the art world. And we discussed for a long time which publisher to go with. And, you know, whether with the money we spend, do we want to support, let's say, an independent, closer to my practice publisher, or are we going for a publisher that has the biggest reach? And for that book, the decision was to go to the publisher with the biggest reach.
So this is Sternberg. Is that what?
Yeah, they're relatively within the art context, they're like the to go. You know, it's a bit boring, but because the intention of the book was it was distribution, and we made it as a joint decision. You know, it was Paul was quite critically said, I don't that doesn't sit within the ethics of your practice. You know, that we support this rather big global publisher. Why not go to someone smaller? But yeah.
And you paid for some of the book, or they how did that work?
No, they in the end they don't pay.
Oh, okay.
As Sternberg doesn't finance any books, I think they have one small series which they pay in commission themselves. Otherwise, they're just a distributor who put a label. They're just a platform.
Okay, yeah, that's different from academic.
Yeah, completely. And it's a bit, again, that's not spoken about, that most art books are financed before they go to art publishers.
Yeah, that's
like people say it's a bit like the commercial gallery. They think are gonna get discovered one day. No, it's, you know, this is about hard finance to a degree, you know, like if you get the money, you get published. Yeah.
Interesting.
And from the selling price, is there a share which goes to you or to any of your projects, or?
No. I mean, I didn't do the contract. We just kept vast amounts of books to myself. So I don't, you normally get 3, you know.
Yeah.
I got 400. So.
Oh, that's a payment. Yeah, definitely.
So you are paid in kind then.
Kind of, but then otherwise it's also, you know, it's not cheap to sell books. You know, I don't, because I know the woman the founder of Sternberg, Carolyn, God, what's her surname now? She came to Compost and she really liked it. And even though they're like a massive publisher, they really struggled in the pandemic. So it's of course they make money, but it's not like massive profit that would go to someone. So you almost write it off.
But getting 400 books, then you have to then sell and send out and everything. That's also business. I mean, not business, but I mean like a lot to do that. Right?
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, we share it, no? Like between Publix, the showroom, Gothenburg, and myself, we kind of share the mailing out. And then there's quite a few book launches. So that's all okay. But it is generous to have so many copies. You normally get like 5.
Very
And
good.
then you can pay, then you can buy your own book.
Yeah, I think I'm brilliant because I get 10 or something. So you're doing really well.
Yeah.
400. I never imagined. But now everything is academic. Things are so much online. So is this book, do you have it online or an ebook or?
No, I not yet. I should actually talk with Sternberg if I can put the PDF, or maybe I just do it. It's a little bit, it's only been published in May, so I was thinking, let's wait a year.
Yeah, I mean, that should be in your contract, right? They would have, imagine.
They don't do ebooks.
Oh, okay.
So I think I would have to make the PDF
Organize it,
available.
kind of.
But even having this PDF,
Yeah. No, I agree.
that would be great, I think.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
saw that you had a chapter with Gregory Charlotte.
Yeah,
If you can elaborate on it, there was something in the title which made me curious, but I can't remember now. The glorification or the glorified.
I mean, he, you know, like when you think about contributors to the book, of course, it's also strategic thinking to a degree, you know, which make Cherry and Paul did, like which names make people pay attention to something they wouldn't normally pay attention to. So Gregory is, of course, very established and acknowledged in terms of political activism. So he's close to the practice. We've worked together. So he was approached by Paul. Wait, I can't find it now. To write a text, and he said he never writes about other artists. He never. Okay. That's just not what he does. So they then agreed that we were publishing. Oh, sorry for this. I should know where the. Wait, let me look. I can look in the real book and see where it is. So it was a discussion between him and Paul O'Neill that he would select key terms from his collection of terms that he would like to associate with my practice. Oh, come on. Sorry. Let me do this in an orderly manner. So I look in my book. Page 136. Oh, it's quite high. So that's a kind of selected group of terms that he thinks should go with my practice, to read it either critically or to expand the thinking around my practice.
Interesting compromise, because he's still then engaging with your work.
Yeah.
But yeah, he categorically doesn't write about single artists. Sorry. So within the book, let me go to the. That's maybe quite interesting to know. I mean, the idea of the IDT, and maybe where Christina, you might know this.
Yeah.
It came out of a community economist workshop in Brave New Alps a few years ago. Like this idea, how can we show the scale of our practice? And this idea of calling it IDT instead of limited, to like the IDT as a signifier was born a few years ago. I would still like to follow this up. I still really like this idea, you know, that we show scale by using a collective identifier. So we played with this word in the exhibition, me and Kuba Schroeder, and then decided to develop kind of like key terms to talk about interdependent art worlds. So in Compost, on the left-hand side, we had first drafts, like how to approach this term in relation to the art worlds. And then we used the book to publish this little pamphlet for the first time. So that's a contribution to the book that acts on a one-to-one scale. You know, that's a publication made for the publication. And the idea here was to have a compass that, let's say, supports practices of collectives like mine, to think certain keywords and key terms. And the compass is towards interdependent art worlds. And that's a proposition, you know, not to think about one art world, but art worlds that coexist. And the compass always points towards this, but then with each term, let's just go to the next page. It always points towards inwards and outwards. And this idea that from the experience of many who work in self-organized systems, that there's certain, let's say, guiding ideas, which for this compass we want to distinguish the outwards message, which sometimes has to be bigger than we can achieve in the small, but that they go together. So in terms of governance, and that was discussed a lot with the showroom at the time, who also used Compost to like rethink their own institutional makeup. Towards outwards, of course, this is a radical position to do what you say, whereas towards the inwards, you would probably take a more pragmatic attitude, to actually not stumble across the undoable all the time. So yeah, the compass is organized around terms that we came up with and in conversation came up with, and that was edited in public, like art worlds, to use that term, and the kind of claim or the demand towards society or politics would be cultural democracy, and towards the systems we work within would be nurturing dark matter. And dark matter comes from the same iceberg metaphor of that only the top of the iceberg is the market-driven art world and the rest is dark matter. That's a text by Gregory Chollet.
Yeah.
And of course, in the end, I'll just go to the last page. It's called Penfold Principles to locate it at the showroom where they started to be written and edited. And of course, reflect back or refer back to the Rochdale principles, which were 7 principles. And then also kind of mention kind of close colleagues and other groups who we start to share language and ethics and practice with. So the making of this small pamphlet was Kuba's contribution together with me to the book. I can send. I mean, I can send all of you the PDF. The book itself is massive. I would have to do it as a WeTransfer. But this IDT, that's a small PDF.
Oh, thank you. Do you need us to put our in the chat? Put our emails?
No, I think I have them all.
Okay, great.
But if you would want the book, I think it's 204. It's a big file.
But what you could do WeTransfer, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just don't want to bombard you with like a massive file. But if you want, then I would send the PDF to the book and the PDF to this IDT principles in a WeTransfer after the session.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is it okay if I share it with people, or how do you? You're okay?
Okay, I stop sharing now.
Oh yeah, I need to.
Yeah.
And if we decide to get an actual physical copy, do you suggest we can buy it directly from you, or like?
Like, because I'm in the UK now, I can't post anything outside. You know, it's
not now. I'm not saying.
yeah, but
in
yeah,
the future.
But you can also just order it. You know, it's
Okay.
probably easier. Through Sternberg, or where are you based now, Christina? You're in
Malta.
Malta, yeah. And then Wendy, I sent you another email. You probably heard about the My Villages assembly next.
No, I'm sorry. Can you say? I didn't.
No, that's what I was suddenly thinking it's not next month, it's next week. I sent you the link in case.
Okay, thank you.
But I will definitely download the Feminist Methodologies book as well. I would.
Okay, great. You can be 1,000 and no, it's 1,000K. So you're part of the next 1,000 and what the 1,000 next. I don't know how they do it, to be very honest. But yes, well, I'd be interested to see what you think. Well, we're in different worlds in terms of how we communicate. And
Yeah.
we listen and learn differently, as you know, one of my daughters went to Rietveld and is now doing animation studies and doing such different art practice. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
it's just another world for me, but I'm learning. It's just
yeah, they are. Yeah, because I'm teaching now at a business management school.
gosh.
So
Well, I can't do that at least I'm teaching environment, political ecology and things that have some resonance with what you do with business management.
But the translation work that goes into
it's crazy.
What do you mean? Why? Are we all still Cassie, maybe not, are we all still in the European there was a European group of CERN that would meet once in a while. Is that still going? Do you know?
I sometimes see things. I haven't gone to it
I
myself.
think sometimes it's happening. So I think it's the last Thursday, I think, of the month.
Okay.
I haven't been to the last few. I lost a bit track, to be honest. But I think it's still happening.
Well, it'd be nice if it. I should do that. The problem is I get taken up with all these other things, but maybe now I've come to this, I'll get interested again in how people think.
Yeah.
So
Cassie, did you want some time at the end?
No, I don't think so. It's good. If I guess I could just remind people to send pictures to my email. I put it in the chat. Even if you do something afterwards that this book inspired you to do, like walk or cook, you can send that picture as well.
Compost.
Compost, yeah.
okay, that makes me think. All right. I won't think, I'll just do something and send it. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, because
thanks for your time.
No, this was fascinating, really. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll send you something, Casey, even if it's not very profound or anything. Okay, thank you. I'm going to
Thank you.